The SG Child Show is back for its 13th season. Join Sarah Bradford and the SG Child Show team as they explore the world of autism and share stories of hope and inspiration. This season, we're excited to bring you more autism summits featuring experts and advocates from around the world. Go to sgchilds.org.
In the heart of the city, she's shining bright. Oh yeah, stories of love and courage all throughout the night.
Hey everyone, I wanted to take a second to talk to you about the International Autism Summit coming up in April 25th and 26th. It's going to be streaming free from all of my channels. If you haven't already gone to follow me, go to sgchilds.org, click on any of the social media icons, and go follow me so that you can be with us at the International Autism Summit 2025, April 25th and 26th. Can't wait to see you then. Hello, and thank you for joining the SG Child Show today. I am really excited. I know those are my first words of every single show. I'm really excited to have this conversation today, but I really have been waiting. We had something set up and it didn't work out for lots of schedules. Life. Isn't that the case? But we met on the Mental Health Network. I think that's what it's called, podcast with Adam Duvall. He's out of the UK and he has like a panel podcast that's really interesting and they have great discussions. And I'm pretty sure that's the first time that I met you, is that we were on a panel together. And for those of you listening and not watching, today I am sitting down with Dr. Gilly Kahn. I hope I pronounced everything correctly. Please let me know if I didn't.
So can I tell you, just in case you want to know, so the podcast, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because I'm doing like part-time paneling for the podcast now. So if they see me on this and they're like, why didn't you correct her? I don't want them to be mad. So it's Mental Health Warriors podcast.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. And it has like a hand or something as its logo, a handprint, I guess you could say. And they really do great discussions and cover a wide variety and have some great experts and guests on the show to discuss a variety of mental health. And here today, we are going to dive deeper into your work and getting to know you a little bit more. So let's start with an introduction. Let us know, a little bit about yourself and kind of what brought you here.
Yeah, that question is never going to cease to make me
right? It's only 2 hours later.
So I'm Dr. Gilly Kahn. I'm a clinical psychologist, a mom, and a writer, and now newly an author of a book. And I practice in Atlanta, Georgia, but I also see people around the United States and some other states via telehealth. My work specializes in neurodiversity and emotional dysregulation and specific population. Like most of the people I work with are teens and their families. And I love writing. I love reading anything within the area of psychology. It's totally my special interest. And I have 2 little ones. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yay. It's so nice to have you too. And what a great discussion, because there's just so many facets that we can touch on: parenting and, the services you provide, the book, which I'm really excited to get one for myself, number one, and also, really dive deeper into what, drove you to do that. What was I have to do this. I'm going to get it done. So let's start with your family and how that's been supporting you in your work that you're doing in your journey. And what does that look like, raising 2 kids and being a psychologist?
Yeah, I mean, it has definitely been all over the place. I know, as it would be for like any adult with ADHD, but especially, as a mom. And, before earning my PhD, I also earned a master's in experimental psychology. So I was in school for a really long time. And I mean, the reason for that is because, so for an undergraduate, I majored in psychology and creative writing. Before college, I wanted to be a writer. I just wanted to write books. And as I got closer and approached college and deciding, what should I major in, I felt that, banking on a writing career was too risky. And the books I was reading were, I loved like Stephen King, anything with a psychological twist or bend to it. And I was taking the AP Psych class. And so I just decided I love psychology too. So I'm going to start by majoring in psychology. And I just started with a major, psychology minor, and English lit. And then while I was in college, I just decided I cannot live without creative writing. It's just, woven into my very being. And so I just added it so I bumped up the English lit minor to a creative writing major. So I majored in both. But, psychology is, if you want to be a psychologist, you can become a therapist, like a mental health counselor, or you can become like a social worker and get a master's. But I wanted to commit to kind of making it till the end and getting a PhD in clinical psychology. And I think one thing about people who are neurodivergent, people with ADHD, is like once they make a decision, I think especially women, we are, and I talk about this in the book, we're stubborn. You finish the sentence.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
No, there's no stopping us. And I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah. So I set that goal. I made that decision. It was rigid. And so I applied the first time around, but, it was perfectionistic. And I only applied to the best programs that only accepted 1 student or 5 students every application cycle. So I didn't get in. And so at that point, I had to take a detour, and I decided I would do a master's in experimental psychology, beef up my CV, and then try again. And so I did that, and it was a great experience. And I learned a lot. I did a lot of research. And I think one thing you learn as you kind of move forward professionally is that you make the most of your experiences. And I'm sorry to sound cliche, but sometimes things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
Because you meet people on your detour who end up helping you down the line. So it felt that way to me. So I did that, and then I reapplied and I got in. I applied to 15 programs. I was accepted to 1. And I interviewed it a lot. Like I got a lot of interviews, and I was very close with a few of them, but then it becomes complicated. Things are kind of out of your hands. Like, oh, this person lost funding, or, this one, I don't know, another reason that's kind of out of your control. So I ended up at Nova and was very happy there, and completed my PhD and ended up extending because I had my daughter, which was planned. And so everything just took a really long time. So it did require like a lot of support from my husband, because financially, he was kind of carrying the family, and he still is, in terms of like, income, financial disparity. I think it's the case in most households, the male is earning more than the female. But, in our case, it has been okay. And then especially this year, because for a while I was just, it was about finishing, becoming a psychologist, starting to work. And for a year or two, it was more stable. And then, I got to a point where I said, okay, I'm ready to, dive into my creative writing interest and, accomplish that other goal that I had to publish a book. And that's going to slow you down, because you're spending half your time, not seeing clients, but basically taking a risk. It's like if you start a business, you don't know if it's going to be successful. You just know that you love it and that you would regret, I can't speak. You would regret it if you didn't try it. So yeah, that brings me to today.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It's so important. I don't know where I would be without my husband's support. And I think that you and him would get along so well because he is also like a lover of Stephen King books. And he wrote, he gave me that great quote to tell you the other day. He's just a really intuitive and caring person. And so he really puts a lot of just what he says is just truth. And I think that could either hit people really hard and really, smack them across the face, or it can be so touching and heartwarming. And so I guess it's your perception and how you've been approached by this truth. But I think that it's so lovely that way. But the support that, when we found out I was going to need to stay home with a profoundly autistic child, there was no other really option than to give up my careers. And we could have, yes, found options, but I wanted to stay home. I was already in my 30s before I had gotten pregnant. So I was already older and like had career time, if you will. And I was a research paralegal for a long time. So I really appreciate that element of knowing how to do research and really understanding the importance of it. And I think that it's a lot of people you see like, oh, well, how do I do this? And you're like, oh my gosh, just go to the Google search bar and find an answer. Right. But I think that it's kind of like if you haven't been down that road and given the tools and you don't know that you have those tools available. So it's fascinating, but he also supports us here and I couldn't be more grateful, but I really see how much support it's given me to, okay, well, what do I want to do with my time, that I have here? Not that it's not busy outside of this office, but it's really given me the opportunity, especially during COVID. I thought, oh man, like this is more isolating than ever before. And when I got to start the podcast, it was like this door that just opened and all of these people were, in all there and I could meet with everyone. And what a lovely thing to be able to do. And he did the same thing for me. He was like, oh my gosh, get the sign, set up all this. He's set up everything. He's like my interior designer too. Yeah. Just to really he was like, I know that you are like, he always just sees the best in me, and he's like, I know what I see and I'm going to create that for you, my vision. So I'm like, okay, I can roll with that.
Yeah. I think it's a matter also of, I guess, proving yourself,
Yeah.
Like, if you can show someone that you're really dedicated to something and you're really going to carry it through, till the end, which is hard for people with ADHD. But, the way I like to explain it is, in a sense, it's kind of a numbers game. Like, you're going to try a lot of things in life. Some of them fall through, but then other things succeed. But if you can show that some of these things do succeed, they are successful, then I think people are generally more open to supporting and helping you and believing you.
And that reminded me of something I heard. It feels like just yesterday, somebody say, if you don't try, then you are already failing. Like, you either try and you fail or succeed, or you fail. That's it. So why not try a little bit and take a little risk sometimes? But I mean, do your due diligence and be smart about your risk taking if you can be. But of course, there's just, there's so many opportunities. What do you think, going back and backwardsing into the past, as a child, how did writing and this love of writing and reading, how did that happen for you? Was it, nurtured by your parents, like siblings that you watched, family, or mentors? How did that take shape?
This is a good question. So my mom passed away when I was 4 from breast cancer, and she was an artist before she passed. And my house, I can show you one here.
Oh,
Can you see it?
raise it up a little bit more.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Oh, that's lovely.
And that's the small one. You should see, like, I mean, they're huge. I have some
oil painting.
Oil, yes.
Wow.
And anyway, so that was her thing. She was an artist, and
thanks for sharing that. That's so sweet. I love that.
Yeah. And she also wrote. She loved writing too. And she wrote a children's book, and she didn't get to publish it, but she illustrated it. She wrote the entire book, and then my grandmother published it in her honor after she passed away. But she loved writing too. Like, I have some old things that she wrote actually while she was in the Israeli military. She used to write my dad love notes on the military computer, and write poetry.
What a special gift that you are able to see. I think love letters are just so special. I have a couple notes, just even from my parents when I was little, or my husband when we were first dating. It'll be 21 years this year. So, and it's just so, just such a touching sentiment to be able to share.
Granted, there are also letters to, like, her ex-boyfriends and stuff.
I guess context is good. Well, that's funny. Yeah, I guess we have to, go through that. The other relationships, that is pretty funny, though.
Yeah. The full human being, right? With a full history, and apparently very, very interesting, and things I didn't know and I only learned recently. But yeah, in terms of, like, my love, it wasn't that I really observed anyone, because I was 4 when she passed away. So I knew she did, but I didn't really understand, I guess, what her interests were. I think it's just, I really think it's just genetic. Like, I, just loved it. I just picked it up. And it was just something I did for fun. I would just write stories, and I would read them to my friends over the phone, like the home telephone.
Yeah.
I love
that. Oh man, the good old days. Isn't that true? I love to write stories when I was younger too, and I think that it really maybe goes to show the imagination, the creative source, or maybe even openness to being curious about things that are not just attainable through, one thing. Because when you're creating a story, you're bringing so many different ideas to life, and it can be both wonderful, magical, vulnerable. It can be terrifying, especially when you go to publish it, and and then you've poured your heart and soul into things. But
it is terrifying. That's exactly the word to describe it. Like, I just sent it to a few, like, readers recently, and was been, like, on the edge of my seat, like, waiting for feedback. And someone responded and was like, "Gilly, this book is so good." And I was like, "Oh, I can breathe." It's terrifying.
Yeah, it is terrifying. And I have children's books, and I started with writing them as just a hobby, sitting there with toddlers. Thought, oh, this would be fun on, I don't even think it was Canva yet. It was something like totally ridiculous. I was doing it on, a computer from who knows what 90 year. And it just transformed into this, story telling my child that her physical difference, which I also have and is hereditary in my family, that both my kiddos have, it's outer ear microtia. I just have these little like tiny, teeny ears. But I had a hard time growing up. I was bullied. I was called little ears from I don't know how early on in school until I was literally pregnant in a gas station in my 30s, and somebody was like, "Hey, little ears," and I just thought,
Like a random
"You're
person.
got to be kidding me," like hello. It just those things just really can stick with you, I guess, and hopefully our
As
gift
someone with
to older and
ADHD, I
wiser.
totally would have thrown back like, "Hey, big ears."
Yeah. My dad was a general in the Air Force. And so keeping my mouth shut was the kind of goal of that was where I was always kept, was in kind of a closed down state. And so I didn't have the courage or anything to fight back to people like that. I just kind of
I get that.
yeah, it's the saddest thing, isn't it? But I've done a lot of inner child work. Little Sarah's okay now. No. But it's the book. I wanted to let her know that no matter what, that wasn't what defined her. And she didn't need to, she needed to see that there were differences all around her and that those all made up this society. And it was actually about these cats that had like little ears. And so I likened it to how cats are so different from one another. And there's not very many of the same cats. We even have 4 of the same breed. They are nothing alike. They couldn't be further from different from one another. So it's kind of a beautiful
That's a beautiful analogy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when I decided to publish them, and kind of like you said, in a different way, I, went to hundreds and hundreds of publishers, just probably 100 of publishers, and everyone said no.
Like
Nobody wanted hundreds and hundreds. It feels like it. And everyone said no, and nobody was interested because I had written about Down syndrome and autism and physical differences. Nobody was interested in special needs books. They were like, no way. But I self-published them because I knew how important they were. I knew how important they were to not only my family, my neighbors, my kids' peers at school, so that they could have kind of a glimpse of how they could support them better, and maybe understand my son, who was physically different but not physically different than them, if that makes sense, behaviorally different.
That's
And
like a combo
yeah.
of the stubbornness and the mama bear.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Yeah. So anyways, yeah, that terrified notion that I'm going to share this with the world, and what if people tear it down? Like, this is my kids' stories. Is this even, should I do this? Is this risky? I didn't use I guess I did use their names, but bless their hearts. So, but in the process, I think my daughter was like 8 years old at the time, and she has always been an artist. I have always been the wordsmith, and she's such a beautiful artist. And she illustrated a book, and I published it for her, just to show her that like those things can happen. You set your work into motion. So yeah, all girls can become artists, and published ones at that.
Which one is that one? The one that your daughter made or
It's
illustrated?
called Anna's ABC book. Yeah. And it was just so, she put a lot of work into it, into the illustrations, and then I just kind of put a little poem along with it to bring it together. And yeah, it'll be always something special. And she's a teenager now, so I'm sure it's like so cringy that I'm even bringing this up. But someday I hope that it will be something she embraces and is proud of, or wants to share with other generations. Yeah,
I think better to be cringy than not.
yeah, I suppose so, because you can at least look back and know that, like, to know how capable you can be at whatever age, with the support of people who love and support you, which sounds like, both of us have been wonderfully blessed with having in our lives. Let's talk about your, what it's like to be a mom and trying to write a book, and how ADHD falls in line with that. What are some, gosh, I totally, my mind just wants to answer so many questions right now. Okay, stick to one question at a time. What was it like having to, because I know how busy I get when I'm in a project, deal with the needs of everyone and get that done. And how do you deal with your ADHD when you're doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't, that's why I have help. So basically, when I decided I was going to start this project, because it is a project, it doesn't just start with writing a book, it starts with writing a book proposal, knowing how to write a book proposal, looking up information and how do you even get your foot in the door, applying and getting an agent, applying, like you said, sending it to publishers, and it's a whole process. It's a project. And so I knew it was going to be like a huge undertaking. Whatever I had listened to on YouTube, they all said, it takes a long time if you go the traditional route with publishing, and even to try to go that route can take a long time before you decide not to do it. So I figured, it would take a while. So I decided, I had, at the time, we already had a nanny coming on Sundays, and I was seeing clients on Sundays, because, it was sort of, it was to do them a favor. I was also like kind of a people pleaser. I wanted to look good in my position. And it was extra money, obviously, because I was working like 6-day work weeks. And I was feeling really burnt out. I think, when you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, especially when you have ADHD, it's like Groundhog Day. And, I got to a point where I couldn't handle it anymore. And so after talking to someone, I wrote about this in my book. After talking to someone about it, I decided, I'm going to start this. Like I've known since I was 14, I wanted to publish a book. And so I just decided I'm going to start now. And I gave my Sunday clients like a lot of notice, like 3 months notice. And I planned, I gave myself time. And then my Sundays were clear with a nanny. And those were the days that, I would go to Barnes and Noble, like leave the house. You have to leave, because otherwise it's like you still feel your children in the background. You know what I mean? Like their presence and the noise. And if something falls, like it's hard to pay attention, I think, in that context. And so I would literally like remove myself and go to Barnes and Noble. And that's actually where I'm going to do my book launch, exactly where I wrote my book. Nice. Most of it, at least. Yeah. Because I wrote about writing in Whole Foods too. But if I was writing in Whole Foods, it was because Barnes and Noble wasn't open yet. So I like made my rounds, like my way, 8, 9 a.m. Whole Foods, and then made my way to Barnes and Noble.
That's funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I would leave. And it was also, what I found is that if I'm in a context where I feel motivated because there are books around me, or, I would go to Whole Foods. And at the time we started working on like an ADHD. Here's the original one. So this was selling. And
okay. Yeah.
And then we shifted, and now the one that's out is this one. But at the time while I was writing the book, like the purple one was out. So I would go to Whole Foods, see the magazine sitting right there, and then go sit and work. It was like such a good motivator, because it's like a visual of like, it's going to get published. You just need to keep working on it. And there's the, body doubling aspect too. Like we work better when other people around us are working. So I would sit next to someone else with a laptop.
So smart.
Yeah.
Gosh, I've never thought of that, or I mean, I don't know if I have the opportunity, I guess, as much to do that, but maybe I come make him sit on my computer next to me and do stuff. I'll create my own doubling. That's funny. What is your therapy like? What do you offer, and what does that look like if people are interested in looking for services? What do you usually? Yes, teen stuff is like so huge. I have teens. I get it.
Yeah, no, it really, just depends on the family. Obviously, depends on the age. If kid is younger, more 7, I work with them, but I also work a lot with the parents because a lot of times, especially the kids that come in to see me, have behavioral issues, and the parents are unsure about how to manage
Yeah.
their kids' behaviors at home. They might have like outbursts and maybe undiagnosed ADHD or autism, and they aren't really sure like how to get their kid to comply with commands. Like if they tell them to do something, their kid might not listen, or they feel like they need to ask 70 times before their kid actually like follows through. And then that's really frustrating to the parent. It's very overwhelming. That's more younger kids, a lot of behavioral stuff. And then with older teens, it kind of depends. But, for a lot of my neurodivergent clients, I start very simple and I just kind of see where they're at in the beginning. And I try to be very concrete. So, we'll work on like emotion identification and, what are the emotions? Let's start with that. What emotions can you identify? How do you know when you feel anxious? What are some clues? How do you know when someone else feels anxious? What are some clues? Like tying that into, the social aspect. What do people do with their face when they're anxious? Like, what do they do with their bodies? Why do you think they do that? It's interesting. I think to learn it, it's interesting to learn it when you're a teen too. But yeah, and then moving from there, like what's a thought? How does the thought look like? It could look different for different people. Sometimes they can be sentences. Like how can you try to figure out what someone's thinking? This, it seems like intuitive for people, but not for people who are neurodivergent. You need to really like spell it out. And I find that because it differs. With ADHD, it's not so much a disorder of like knowledge. Like people with ADHD generally know this stuff. It's just harder for them in the moment to carry out the right response. So they end up getting in trouble, or people don't like them, or they get rejected. Whereas with autism, it really is just, mostly from my experience, it's a knowledge deficit. They just don't know. Like, but then once someone teaches it to them, like they really do great. In a sense, I feel like it's easier. I mean, I'm not saying this one is it's easier to be autistic than that, but I'm just saying to treat it, to work on that, on the knowledge deficit. If you just teach it and then, the impulsivity isn't necessarily there, then, they're able to apply it very well.
Exactly. And nowadays, when we're seeing this combination of, which I'm sure you see commonly in the ADHD kind of mixture of the two, because a lot of my audience are in the autistic community, and let's be honest, I mean, I'm ADHD, my husband, my kids, like the whole gamut. So let's talk about I don't know if you could say identifiers, if you will, or I don't know if that's the right word to use. And also we'll get to misconceptions in a minute.
Identifiers meaning like how do you diagnose it?
When somebody is curious about if their child might be neurodivergent, what are the kind of standards that you would use to say they fall within these guidelines? I don't know, because you're not using the DSM anymore. What does that look like for you as the doctor who has to make these decisions on the diagnoses?
No, I'm using the DSM, like to diagnose.
Okay.
Yeah. So right now we're on the DSM-5 TR. Doesn't mean I agree with all of the stuff that's in there.
100% right. Okay.
No, as a psychologist, I have to use it.
Interesting. Okay.
It depends on the practice. Like I'm in private practice right now. So technically, like we don't have to. It's like if it's a private pay client, you don't have to include a diagnosis, but it's hard for me. The way I was trained, like I have a lot of testing, like psychological testing in my background. Right now, I don't do it just because I don't prefer it. Like I just don't really like doing testing, although I technically can. But I like therapy more, so I'd rather use my time on that.
Okay.
But I'm knowledgeable about it. And so the way I frame my interventions is with diagnoses, like it's hard for me to, come up with a plan if I don't have a name for it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I have a name, but it's loose. You know what I mean? Like it's name with flexibility. Like, with ADHD, for instance, I'm not like a believer in a lot of people say, what type are you? Like, this is not a horoscope,
Yeah.
It's like, what type? First of all, it's not a type. It's a presentation. The word has been changed because there's so much room for change especially over time. Mostly kids will get diagnosed when they're really young with like predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation or combined, and then it might change to like inattentive. I hate that word too. Like as you make it into adulthood, for me it's like, do you have ADHD or do you not? And because if it can change, then it's just symptoms, right? Like your symptoms can change over time, but the core diagnosis is the same. With autism, we have different levels. That's different. It's like talking about like the level of supports that the person needs. That makes so much more sense to me. It would make more sense to me to have ADHD be a bunch of symptoms and the person just needs to meet criteria for ADHD, and then what level of support do they need? And then the thought that it could be on a spectrum also makes sense to me. With ADHD, like why do we treat one like this but the other one differently? But it doesn't matter because it helps me understand, and create interventions regardless, even though there are, I feel like these gaps.
Which is nice that you get to individualize them because like you said, it's going to be different for every family that's stepping in, their cultural differences, experiences, family dynamics, so much to go into that, how you would, help one family. So that's a lot of work, and that's exciting though, and like creative in a way that you get to put these strategies in place and then see them through. So
humans are complicated. That's why I and a lot of other therapists would probably agree that AI is not going to take over our profession. Like we are not threatened at all.
I love that.
It's not a job for robots.
Yeah. I mean, it's great for organizing paperwork, but really, it's not gonna, especially when we're understanding more and more, right? My vocabulary. When we're learning more and more about the presentations, like you said, of autistic individuals, of ADHD, neurodivergent apraxia, we're learning so much, and it's coming to, there's lights being shown, and we kind of have a little bit of a glimpse of how we can better support those other, members of our society that have been in years past, let's just be honest, forgotten and pushed aside, and that's painful. So how do you see the misconceptions of ADHD? What do people normally have as a misconception?
Yeah, I mean, the most common response is like, well, no, she can't have ADHD. She's not like bouncing around everywhere, or like she's able to sit still. Or, for boys, if you're thinking about boys, a common misconception that used to be, and I hear it sometimes still, but like they'll say, how can he have ADHD? Like that would mean he can't pay attention and he can sit with his video games for hours. I remember hearing that more like early on in my career when I was a student, and now less. Like people are more aware that that's not a good rationale for a kid not to have ADHD. You can be like hyper focused and really interested on something and sit through it for hours, just like someone who's autistic can.
Exactly.
But if it's not interesting, that's the problem. And that's why I hate the word inattention, because it's not inattentive. If anything, it's an overabundance of attention. I know I've heard Dr. Ned Hallowell describe it like that. And a bunch of other ADHD experts describe it in that way. And I even boil it down, like in my book, I have a chapter on like the neurobiology and neurotransmitters. And basically, I talk about how like brain structure is important in understanding ADHD, as I'm sure also autism and other forms of neurodiversity. But what seems to be more relevant is brain function, like what is happening in the brain, and it's the over communication. And the way I describe it is, I only remember this because I've been looking at this for so long now, but my book, like the manuscript and editing and whatever, but I wrote, it was like, there's like a 1920s style Great Gatsby party in your brain while you're trying to do your homework.
Right?
It's like there's this push and pull, between different brain networks, and overactivity. There's a party in there, and that's what's because there's too much attention. You're paying attention to this thought that's irrelevant, while also trying to focus on what's in front of you. The other thing is, Dr. Russell Barkley talks about this, but like ADHDers are field dependent learners, meaning that, if you think about like working memory, for example, working memory is the ability to hold information in mind and then manipulate it. So like mental math requires really good working memory skills, and we're just not good at that. And so field dependent learning basically means that you're like a visual learner and you're learning and taking in information from your environment, from the stuff that's around you, and then kind of making little calculations in your head, trying to understand it. But you need to have that stuff in front of you. And that's why we suck, at mental math. It's hard for us to do that, but we could sit and, with a calculator, if we're given paper and pencil, it's a little bit easier for us.
Yeah.
If it's visual and active and, we could put it down on something in front of us. So if we're field dependent learners and we're so in tune with what's happening around us, because it's hard to keep all of it in our heads, think about what happens like when you're trying to focus on that textbook or reading that one paragraph in front of you. Like there's so much to look at in the world. So you're absorbing all this information, plus all the information that's distracting you in your brain, plus trying to focus on the paragraph in front of you. So there's only, people talk about doing like alternative therapies. Like how the hell are you going to use an alternative therapy for that? Like you have to, there's nothing better that's going to help it than medication. If that makes people angry, then, that's fine. That's just what the research shows.
No, I'm glad you said that, because that was weird. I was going to bring that up because I really like to show both sides of that, because I personally, don't want to look into medications, but I believe that it is so important for those who are interested and who do have that. Let's talk about the types of medications that do help. And I completely believe in it. I just don't want it for myself, and isn't that what it comes down to? It's really our own free will, personal journey, experience, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I definitely wanted to touch on medication because I completely respect that. And I think that people that get mad about it don't have the ability to stand outside and see both sides. And maybe that's one of my superpowers.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. At the end of the day, it's a personal decision. I also am a very big advocate of educating yourself. And, when I say educating yourself, like you said before, like doing research, right? But looking at Google Scholar, listening to the experts in the field talk about it, but not just the experts, right? Like also talk to people, real human beings, who struggle with the disorder, and ask them what has helped you. It's good to combine, I think, like anecdotal or like personal evidence. As a clinical psychologist, I have to say this, because you can look at the numbers and research and not be convinced. But if you can talk to a few people, in addition to reading the research and listening to experts, for example, Dr. Russell Barkley, Dr. Edward Hallowell, a book that really inspired me and moved me to write my book was ADHD 2.0. You can also listen to or read Understanding Girls with ADHD. Those are both really good places to start. Focusing on ADHD, of course, there's a lot of resources for all the other neurodevelopmental conditions, but I can speak the best, in terms of that, subfield, because I just wrote a book about ADHD in women. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the research, it's like the numbers just don't lie. And I think there's a lot of like fear mongering from the media, basically trying to, I guess, like disseminate misinformation that stimulant medications are scary or they're like really bad for you. But this is the most well-studied psychotropic drug on the market because of all of the negative attention that it has been given. And it's the most effective and it's the most carefully studied. And the other thing is honestly, that has pushed me, and I'm going to start my daughter on medication, and she's young, she's 7. But the reason I want to is because there's also abundant research a lot of people don't know about something called neuropromotion. Russ Barkley calls it neuropromotion, but others have called it like neuroprotection. But he said it's more appropriately neuropromotion because basically there are studies showing that when kids have taken stimulant medications to treat their ADHD over several years, then their brain starts to develop to a point where it starts to become non-distinguishable from people who are neurotypical. So it's overall brain volume. And then also specific brain areas that are affected by ADHD, such as the cerebellum, the frontal lobe. I don't know if it said also the basal ganglia. I don't remember all the specific areas, but there's research looking at targeted like brain areas that are generally affected in people with ADHD, and they use like fMRIs and imaging techniques to show that like there's change and growth over time for those who take stimulant medications.
And I think it's important. I love that you said it several times. It's important to find things that have been studied. And I think that you, especially having that kind of interest, knowledge to find those things is so important and so helpful to your clients, because they're not just getting something that, this pharmaceutical company is paying me as this doctor to sell this drug that I don't know anything about. I, don't know that that's ever happened, but, just in case. No, I really like that you said that, because I think that that's an important factor to take into when deciding what type of medication you're going to take for yourself or put your child on, especially. And, for us personally, we did, when my son was younger, tried some, I'm trying to think, tried some medications, but he wouldn't take oral medications. And so
you said your son is autistic, no?
Correct. Yeah.
And
it was, he at the time was, had been diagnosed. We went to Goldberg, who is a psychologist here in Utah. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's written a few books as well. And did some work on the DSM or something, but he was a little proud of himself in his session with us and telling us all of his accolades or whatever. Anyways, but he also, at that time diagnosed him autism, ADHD, global developmental delay. He does have a 99% working memory. So I think that you understanding that is like, yay, somebody that understands it can really like appreciate what that means. And there's, he was like reading at 1 and writing at 2 and just like memorizing everything he ever saw. And so it's been an exciting life with him. Although and he has a really hard time with reciprocative conversations or any that kind of communication. So it doesn't provide him the necessary skills and
He doesn't
social
need
things that he
yeah.
does. But yeah, so I think it was like Concerta or something. And it was, we only did it for a couple of days because like I said, he wouldn't do oral medication. And so we had to like shove it in his mouth quickly right when he woke up. The most horrifying, traumatic thing that you
I
have
was
to
gonna
do.
say, yeah. Okay.
Absolutely hated it. So I went to his pediatrician. I said, no, I can't do this. This is nope. I'm not doing this. We got to find something different. I said, find something topical. So she did. She went and she found a patch that we'd put on him. And we were only doing it because he was going to start a new school. And we wanted just to put him on the best, place
Yes.
forward for him. But those things didn't end up working out for him. We did notice, like the first day on the Concerta, I filmed him. He was a totally different person. He spoke differently. He, if it were to work for him, I don't know. It's too bad that there weren't other ways that we could have done a little bit more, but he ended up not sleeping for 4 days after that first time that we had him on that. And yeah, it was just like a mess, trial and error mess. Right. But he's 15 now. And that was when he was like 8 or 9. So it's been years ago since we've even tried medications. But with my daughter, I thought, okay, she also ADHD, autism, dyslexia. And so for her, it was more, we went for the dyslexia diagnosis, which was obvious. And the teachers didn't think so because once again, she was a smart girl who could have these wonderful conversations, who was very curious and imaginative. And how could she be dyslexic? Well, because she writes backwards. Like, pay attention, teachers. It was so interesting. But yeah, we finally got her help. But just recently, for 7th grade, I thought, okay, well, just want to try to get her the most support. And so I found a supplement that I won't sell on here because I don't know about it enough, but it really seemed to help. And just like the focus and just really like, oh, I feel really good. There didn't have any side effects, anything. So I took it for a couple of times too. And I thought, wow, this has really helped me get through my day. So I think that finding what works for you is a fantastic idea, and not being afraid of trying a medication for yourself or your kiddo.
I was going to say that about your son too. I was going to say it's better to try. I think in most cases, it's better to try than not to try, because now you've tried it and you can say, this is another way not to screw in a light bulb. This doesn't work. And in most cases, it's not going to permanently damage your child. I mean, I don't know of a single story like that. I'm sure they exist somewhere. There's always a fluke, case. But yeah, the stimulant medication, the nice thing about it is it's not like an SSRI where you have to take it for 6 weeks and then know whether it's effective or not. You can take it one day and even take a short acting one, like an Advil. It's like 4 hours long. And then if you don't like it, don't take it again.
Exactly. Exactly. And, like you said, maybe give it a measured test run so that you can see how it helps, or if it really messes you up. Yeah, like you said, don't do it. But I think it's important. I think it's an important part of the discussion, and part of the understanding that it's not a one size fits all anything. Our brains are different, no matter whether, we're both ADHD, autistic, whatever. Like, our brains are still going to be different. And I think that that's so fascinating. What do you think? What's your opinion about brain scanning and brain mapping and scans? That's how I got my information. What's your opinion about that?
I'm skeptical of it.
Okay.
I know that Catherine Ellison, so she's published a book called Buzz, A Year of Paying Attention. She writes about her experience with finding out about her own ADHD and treating her son who has ADHD, but now he's an adult, but he was a kid in the book. And so she goes and she does, like, I don't know if brain scanning, brain mapping, they're all the same. I don't have personal experience with it, but I know that the research is kind of like mixed and muddied in relation to, it's like validity? Is it really kind of measuring what we think it's measuring? And so because of that, I'm skeptical. Even with genes, there aren't any like genes or a group of genes we could specifically point to and say like, here are the genes that produce, ADHD or really like any mental disorder, to my knowledge, at least. I think maybe it'll be a long time before we can get to a point where we can really boil it down and simplify them that way, or maybe we won't ever get there at all.
Isn't that the truth? And I think as a parent, there has to be a time where, as a doctor, don't ever give up this curiosity as why and where and how. But as a parent, there comes a time where you have to just accept your kid or yourself or whatever. I guess I'm speaking, as a parent for a kid, of who they are as a person and what this child is like and their personality, rather than just seeing them for, the things that they could change about themselves to make them seem better, whatever. I think that's sad, but I think it's just a journey. There's a lot of parenting styles that are changing. A lot of open discussions about how we can do things differently. And maybe it, comes a lot from, like you had kind of mentioned before, living experience, have someone living that experience, especially as a parent, as a woman who, maybe has ADHD, and hopefully it's a valid enough thing that I can trust now. And I think that between me and my husband, a thing that we always kind of said between each other was, do you really question things like this if they aren't in front of you? Like, you wouldn't go outside and be like, boy, I wonder if the sky is red today or if it's gray. Like, it's obviously gray. You don't have to wonder if it's a red day. Like, it's not. But I think that people often find themselves in this like, oh, I wonder. And I think that there's a little bit of like curiosity to be had with that question. So be curious. I think that's the best thing.
Yeah. I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying that like, you want to feel certain about certain things, but you also need to be open to the possibility that they're not necessarily what you expect, or right?
Yeah. Or, and I'm maybe speaking from more of like my kind of support system and more in an autistic like support. So like my mom never questioned in her life whether or not she might be neurodiverse. Is she neurotypical because of that? I don't know. I questioned my whole life whether I was typical. For me, that is telling to me that I possibly am not, because I don't think I would question it otherwise. I don't know if we have that within us to be curious about. I don't mean that was like a super deep, I don't even know where it came from thing to say. It's pretty generalized and probably totally, could be falsified, but hey, today's Sarah's opinion.
It all depends on, I think, like, what perspective you're looking at it from. If you look at just material, simple perspective, where you're just like, I need to get my services covered by insurance, then you need very clear-cut answers. But as a human being, my opinion is like, what's so bad with leaning into uncertainty and just saying like, I think a lot of things in life are just constructed. Right? I was having this conversation with my husband the other day too. Like, there are subjects within psychology that, people will say like, well, you can't prove that. What can you prove? I mean, even now the ADHD criteria, like, were developed on and for mostly little boys, are going to change. Nothing is set in stone. Things change, opinions change, our understanding of the world changes. That's part of being alive and growing. And you have to be okay with that.
Oh, I can't believe how much time has gone. This has been such a great conversation. I want to make sure that everyone knows where to go, get the book, talk about the book. And let's talk about, what is the book called? I have a little preview here. I'm going to pull it up really fast for everybody to see it. Allow me to interrupt. Tell us the moment you decided, like, oh, this is my book. This is going to be the title. This is, the cover. I kind of saw you get to go through that process. So
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. It feels good when you pull it up. I love that megaphone. It's so cool.
yay.
Yeah, but how do I don't know. There were a lot of questions there. Okay, a title. So actually, interestingly, the first title I had when I was pitching without an agent or anything, it was Sensitive and Selective. Because again, I hate the word inattention. I think it's more selective attention. And because I wanted the book to be about emotional dysregulation and sensitivities, I think there's a big sensory component to that. So that was the title. And then, basically the agreement was that it's too complicated and not catchy enough. So then I came up with Allow Me to Interrupt. And then together with my team, we came up with A Psychologist Reveals the Emotional Truth Behind Women's ADHD. Mm-hmm. But I like it. It's it's got that pizzazz and kind of playfulness to it. And I think, my tone and the stories, in the book they're playful, they're serious, but there's some funny elements to them because we're funny.
Absolutely.
We're funny. Yeah, but it's also, and I start chapter 1 with this. It's also inspired by The Taming of the Shrew.
Okay.
So each chapter is written kind of like the wording of if I be waspish, best beware my sting. So that's chapter 1, and then every chapter is kind of worded like that, right?
Wow.
If I be lost, best I find my way, like Shakespeare.
It's fantastic. I love that you brought your own elements into it like that and made it less clinical, if you will, and more just for an everyday reader. And I love that. Really, really lovely. And you can go to Dr. Gilly Kahn's website here at www.drgillykahn.com, where you can find links to the website, links to the book on the website, and also links to social media to go follow social media. The book is in pre-order right now. Is that correct? Whoops,
yes.
Don't do that one.
Yeah, it's going to launch September 9th.
Say that again, September 9th?
Yeah, it launches September 9th, but pre-order it because that's how basically, apparently, I had to teach this to myself, but that's how they know how many, copies to make. So if you really want to make sure that you get a copy on time, then it makes more sense to pre-order it.
Love that. And that will all be in the show notes so that you can go and get that information and go and support. And, if you're looking for therapy services in Atlanta, and you loved this discussion and want to find out more, please reach out. What are your plans? What you said, you're on to the next thing.
Yeah. So, I have to discuss, I pitched a couple ideas and I'm kind of set on this one idea. So hopefully I can carry it through, but this is just thoughts, and hypothetical at the moment, but I'm really interested in ADHD, but I'm also really interested and one of my articles in ADHD, the Women's Magazine, is on this topic. It's about intuition, gut feelings, consciousness, and, consciousness, the question of consciousness of, is it, kind of limited to brain activity, or could there be kind of beyond the brain?
Love it. I love that.
Yeah.
Right up my alley. If you ever want to have a deep discussion.
Very nervous with people. I'm learning. I get really
Isn't it? It really is, isn't it? I think that it is definitely. So I think that the way you kind of went about what I'm going to say this. That's great. I love that. Oh, I wish you all the best. And I'm really, really glad we got to catch up and have this amazing discussion today. Any advice that you want to give to other women with ADHD out there, since it seems like that's something we just didn't touch on, unfortunately? We'll have to have another discussion about that someday.
Advice to women with ADHD.
Yeah, give us some good. What's your top kind of advice that you would give?
They don't know you as well as you know yourself. That's what I would say. Because other people can be judgmental and they can misunderstand you, but deep down that what kind of a person you are and what your intentions are and what your goals are, and don't let other people stop that.
Love that. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. It's really just been such a pleasure, and I look forward to keep following you and watching your journey and getting the book and reading all of the exciting and fun things. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Of course. Yeah. Same to you. Thank you so much for having me on the show today, Sarah.
Shining bright, oh yeah, stories of love and courage all throughout the night. Her voice resonating, an anthem for all through the trials and the trials. She answers the call, a mother and a fighter, breaking barriers in stride. With love as her guide, she'll never hide. She's changing the world for you, with a heart that's fierce strong. Empathy's a melody. Journey we all belong. Followers gather like stars in the night. So bright, 44,000 voices sharing in the light. She stands for family, advocates for more. A movement of compassion, ways will soar. Podcast together, a symphony of support. Creating life, changing rapport. She's changing the world for you. The heart that's fierce and strong.